Welcome to Far East Wargaming. I'm Richard, once again bringing you another Heresy Thursday, and with me today we have Jason.
Hello, everybody.
So today we're bringing you another army review, and this week we're looking at the 7th Legion, the Imperial Fists, the poster boys for the Loyalists in the latest edition of the Horus Heresy.
Ooh, controversial. I know there's a lot of strong feelings out there amongst gamers around the Imperial Fists, whether it's the plethora of choices they get or their overall power. So, yeah, let's dive in and let's see what we seem to think about all this.
Yes, I think it's a common consensus that the Imperial Fists are getting a lot of love, and they have a quite powerful rule set, and it keeps getting slowly but surely stronger. But let's start where we start with all of the legions. Let's start with the Legion special trait, which is Discipline and Resolve, which basically allows +1 to hit on all auto weapons and bolt weapons as part of a shooting attack, and that is including a reaction.
Yes, so this is a change from 1.0. In 1.0, it was mostly just affecting your bolter type weapons. It's now affecting auto weapons, and that's huge. So things like your autocannons, your predator cannons, your Leviathan storm cannon, your shotguns, your Elastis pattern assault cannons, all of these weapons now also get +1 to hit. It's very, very strong. It increases their damage output, and it's usable all the time, which puts it up there, I think, amongst the top tier of the Legion traits.
Yes, expanding it out of just bolters into all bolt weaponry and auto weaponry, which then now applies across the board for vehicles, walkers, and infantry troops, means that it's one of the traits that has the biggest use across an army.
Yes, and a lot of units that you may not see commonly played in some of the other legions do have a lot of use in the Imperial Fists. A Predator Squadron with their standard autocannons comes to mind as probably one of the ones that sticks out a lot. Scout squads with shotguns, veterans with shotguns. I mean, a lot of these choices that you don't always see, again, played in the other legions, become much more useful and more deadly in the hands of an Imperial Fist player.
Yeah, and for some of the heavy weapons upgrade slots, or just the standard heavy bolter, it's like having a Master of Signals with you to aid you get the Ballistic Skill 5. So Ballistic Skill 4 units are suddenly now hitting on 2s with a lot of the heavy weaponry.
Yeah, so when we start to talk about some of the other rules the Imperial Fist gets, there's a lot of synergy here, and there's a lot of stacking that happens. I mean, but a good rule of thumb is basically an Imperial Fist player with a lot of these weapon types doesn't particularly care about night fighting, ballistic skill modifiers, or things of that nature as well. So, very strong trait in my opinion.
Yes. And if we look at their advanced reaction as well, it's again one of those very strong advanced reactions because it's a surprise reaction against most legions.
Yes, the best defense is the name of their advanced reaction, and it allows once per battle in the opposing player's movement phase. If you end within 10 inches in line of sight of a model with the Legion of Astartes Imperial Fist rule, then that unit can make this reaction, and basically they get to declare a charge against you. Very, very powerful. Anything that allows you to do something particularly nasty in the opponent's phase, shooting reaction, this reaction, Space Wolves, a lot of these different kinds of reactions that allow this kind of activity are really, really, really strong. Now, the charge distance that goes off is equal to a D6 plus the lowest unmodified initiative characteristic, so that's an important distinction. It's not using your hero's initiative, it's using usually your regular guy's initiative. You still have a 10-inch charge potential with this particular reaction and a minimum of 5. So really, really, really strong. And if the charge fails, there's no surge. But overall, I think this is a very, very strong reaction and can lead to a lot of surprises if you're actually not prepared for it.
Yes, this kind of reaction, especially in the movement phase as opposed to the assault phase there, really does negate key assaults by legions such as the Emperor's Children, who need to get their charge off to be the most effective due to their legion trait.
Yes, and the other thing that's important about this rule as well, or this advanced reaction, is the rule that says you basically get all your bonuses for charging. So you'd get your +1 attack, you'd get your Hammer of Wrath, you'd get all those types of rules that trigger on a successful charge. They also come into play when this reaction goes off.
Yeah. All in all, honestly, I think this, because of what it allows you to do, and especially the phase it's in, which is uncommon, is one of the stronger reactions and just makes this Legion even stronger than they already are.
It's going to continue the theme that we have so far, which is there's probably nothing bad in the Imperial Fist. And this is another example of that.
Yeah. And, well, speaking of nothing bad, we can look at the 3 warlord traits that are in the Liber Astartes, and unsurprisingly, there are no traitor traits at all, because it's the Imperial Fists. There's 1 loyalist only, and then 2 neutral traits. And if we start with the loyalist only, the Solar Marshal, this one here is, well, honestly, one of the strongest I've seen for a Warlord's unit, because what it allows is all friendly models that the unit the Warlord joins gains +1 weapon skill in combat with any traitor unit, which will be every unit you play against there. And it only allows you to do a reaction with that unit, but in any phase. And we've seen how weapon skill, having +1 weapon skill over your enemy in close combat, is extremely extremely positive to you and detrimental to your opponent in this latest edition of combat.
Everybody's premier assault units or Death Stars basically got knocked down a peg when it comes to their effectiveness. So, for example, you've got a Imperial Fist Warlord. He's already going to be usually with, a command squad or Huskarls, something that already has weapon skill 5. He can now throw those into your elite units, and he's still going to be hitting you on 3s due to this Warlord trait, and you're going to be hitting them on 5s. It just makes their combat potential so much more powerful and makes them much more durable on top of that. So it's a really, really great Warlord trait. It's probably the one I see played the most by our Imperial Fist players. And yes, I mean, the icing on the cake is the fact that you can make your choice of an additional reaction in any of the phases. Yes, very, very strong, very, very good, and definitely the popular choice.
Yes. On the counter side, it is a unit-specific Warlord trait, but then again, you do tend to be putting your Warlord with your most elite close combat unit, and with the Imperial Fist and their ability to teleport, which is one of the few abilities to teleport, makes this usable nearly in every game, because unlike some of the legions where it's hard to get into close combat, due to the maneuverability of teleport or just the way transports are working for the Imperial Fists, getting this unit into close combat is almost a guarantee at least halfway through the game.
I do like the fact that it encourages aggressive playstyle and not just castling, although as you can see later on in the other rules, you can, of course, put together a very strong Imperial Fist gunline castle. So I do like that particular aspect of it, but it is a very, very powerful trait.
Well, if we look at the next one, and I'm going to let Jason take this because honestly my pronunciation of some of these things is appalling.
That's all right. I'll take a stab at it. So Warden of Inwit. So Inwit is the home planet of the Imperial Fists. And what this basically says is this warlord trait is when you are within 6 inches of an objective or within your own deployment zone, the warlord with this trait and any models in the unit that he joins automatically pass morale or pinning checks that they are called upon to make. And then as an added bonus, you get an additional reaction during the assault phase as long as the warlord is still alive. This one can be used offensively or defensively. So for offense, obviously it's pretty self-explanatory. You stick him with an aggressive unit that wants to go take an objective, like some Phalanx Warders, Templar Brethren, or even just a regular squad of Breachers or Tacticals. Now they're not going to run. If they're in their zone and you want to play defensive, you stick your Warlord with a shooting unit. It can't be pinned. It's a very, very flexible Warlord trait. I don't think it's as strong as the Solar Marshal one, but it's certainly not bad, and you can use it in pretty much any type of list if you want to go, again, aggressive or defensive.
One of the things to bear in mind about this trait is that it's not 6 inches from the Warlord, it's 6 inches from his unit. So this has the ability to have quite a large area of effect, as opposed to some of the other Warlord traits, which are ranged directly from the model.
Well, it's within 6 inches of an objective, or within your zone, so it's really still only affecting the Warlord and his unit. But you don't even have to be within control range of an objective to trigger this. And your deployment zone is obviously a big chunk of real estate. So yes, I mean you're gonna be able to use this pretty much all the time with proper placement of your models.
Well, then also, we were talking just a moment ago about castling, and that really comes into play with the last Warlord trait in the Liber Astartes, the Architect of Devastation. And this here plays really to the lore of the Imperial Fists.
Yes, this is more defensive, and it basically says the Warlord and the models in the unit that he joins with Legion Astartes Imperial Fist can re-roll failed to hit rolls of 1 as long as that unit is entirely within area terrain that grants a cover save or embarked within a fortification. In addition, you get an extra shooting phase reaction, which of course is the strongest of all the reactions usually. This stacks so well with gun lines, and it stacks so well with the Legion trait of the Imperial Fists. Your auto and your bolt weapons are already hitting on +1. And then if your Warlord happens to be with a unit that has these kinds of weapons, they're re-rolling 1s to hit. So here we have a mechanism to pretty much take a lot of random variability out of your dice rolls and basically guarantee that whatever unit he's with that's shooting, it doesn't specify shooting or combat, so that also is applicable as well. It just ups their output and their damage potential. So this is just another really, really strong Warlord trait, and it does stack really, really well with the Legion trait.
Yeah, it's very thematic for the Imperial Fists. They are known in the lore to be the defenders. They are the defenders of Terra during the Solar War and the Siege of Terra. So I do like it. Again, it's not one you see that often because of the strength of the other two Warlord traits. But if you're looking to build something thematic gunline based for your army, this is definitely a significant bonus for them.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about the special HQ choice the Imperial Fists get in just a moment. But this also stacks with his abilities as well, and we'll talk about that when we get to that section.
Well, those are the 3 traits you get in the standard Liber Astartes book. But the Imperial Fists, along with the Sons of Horus, have actually received some more Warlord traits from the most recent release of the Siege of Chthoniya book. And they've added 2 more Warlord traits there, 1 Loyalist and 1 Neutral. And the first is called Unforgiven. What this trait does is it allows your Warlord to not immediately die when he's in close combat with certain units, that mainly being Primarchs, Dreadnoughts, Knights, Titans, Warlords. He doesn't suffer instant death, he suffers D3 wounds. Now, this is helpful in some respect, because your Warlord will tend to have more than a couple wounds, but still not as great as some of the other Warlord traits here. But the other benefit is, if you're in combat with the enemy Warlord, your unit gains the Fearless special rule, which actually can come into play, especially with the larger units that the Imperial Fist tend to run.
Yeah, I don't think this is a very useful Warlord trait, to be honest with you, because if your HQ choice is in combat with a Primarch or a Walker with their Brutal 3 close combat weapons, you've done something wrong. And even though you're not suffering instant death, you're still rolling a lot of saves. And every one of those failed saves is D3 wounds, basically, in many cases. So that, to me, limits the usefulness of this. The fact that you also have to declare charges if the enemy gets within 12. I mean, if your opponent is smart, he can actually get your Death Star with this Warlord trait out of usefulness, right? He can basically move them around the table. I don't think it's a very good Warlord trait, to be honest with you, but I'm also not complaining because, as we already discussed, the core Warlord traits for the Imperial Fist are quite good. Yeah, it's a little fluffy, but I don't see this one getting used hardly at all.
The same can really be said with their other warlord trait from the Siege of Cathonia, Bound by Glory. And what this allows you to do is select basically the opposite legion that you're playing, and your warlord and all models in his unit gain the Fearless special rule when locked in combat. But the downside is, you're not allowed to make any sweeping advances, which can be detrimental if you're using certain close combat units with your warlord there.
Yeah, I mean, Fearless is great. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think this is any better than your standard Warlord trait where you're getting a +1 to your weapon skill. I'd much rather be getting that and increasing the damage output than relying on Fearless and sticking around, because there's really no reason that you want your Death Stars sticking around. You're going to be putting them with things like Huskarls or Command Squads or stuff that already have a great offensive output, so I don't really think you need the Fearless. Um, you get an extra reaction in the assault phase, which is okay. But no, I don't think this Warlord trait or the Unforgiven, the other Warlord trait from the Cathonia book, I don't think either one of these are actually very good, and I don't really see anybody taking these over the other three that are available.
Yes, it was quite a strange addition by Games Workshop to add these extra warlord traits when they really aren't substantial enough to make them wanting to be used as opposed to their three core ones.
No, I mean, I guess, I mean, I do appreciate as a more of a fluff player, as more of a narrative player, I do appreciate the fact that you have a little bit of this flavor added for those that are wanting to play more narrative games, more Cathonia games, etc. But yes, they're just not very good. But boohoo, Imperial Fist players, your other traits are great. So
Well, that's all the traits for the Imperial Fists. Now we're going to move on to the Imperial Fist Rites of War. And I think as you'll find as we go through these are arguably some of the best Rites of War. So let's kick it off with the Stone Gauntlet here.
ugh, this one, I say because it's one of those rites of war that's incredibly powerful. I also say because I'm sorry, Imperial Fist players, when you play this particular rite of war, it makes you the Eldar of 30k. Frustrating to play against, very hard to deal with, very hard to kill. But let's get into it. So basically, for the Stone Gauntlet, your Phalanx Warder squads, so your breachers, your Legion-specific breachers, they become troop choices. They also gain line and also Heart of the Legion. So as if they weren't hard enough to kill, they get all these bonuses as well. This is a big difference from many of the other Rites of War where the Legion-specific units don't gain line when they have this type of Rite of War. So an example is the Iron Hands with, the Medusan Immortals and the Company of Bitter Iron. You can take them as troops. Yes, but they don't gain all the same bonuses. Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very strong ability for Phalanx Warder squads. Anybody with a boarding shield within unit coherency, you get to reroll failed and vulnerable saves. And this is just nasty. The boarding shield is normally a 5-up invuln, but Phalanx Warder squads have a special rule that turns it into a 4-up. So every single model in the unit gets a 4-up rerollable, which is technically stronger than a 3-up invuln or a 3-up armor save. You can stick apothecaries with that unit for extra lulls if you want it to be even harder to kill. Absolutely nasty, and it makes these models really, really, really hard to kill. You also gain the added bonus of Hammer of Wrath. So if you do get a charge off with those units, it's just some extra free attacks, which is always nice. A lot of bonuses for this Rite of War. And the limitations are really not limitations in my mind. You have to select the Phalanx Warders as compulsory troops, but hey, as we just discussed, why wouldn't you? You can't deploy using Deep Strike or Subterranean Assault or Flanking Assault. So that one is a bit of a limitation, but since you're probably taking large blobs of Phalanx Warders and marching them across the table, it's not too big of a deal, and it's going to be really hard for a lot of people to kill that anyhow. And then finally, the last limitation is you can't take more elites and fast attack choices in total than you have troops in the detachment. So you want to maximize your troops, but that's really not a big deal because your standard tactical squad is super cheap. Bare bones recon squads or small recon squads are cheap. So if you're really worried about your fast attack or elites slots, you just need to take an extra troop choice or two. But hey, again, that's not a really, really big deal. Very, very strong Rite of War overall. Makes your stuff very hard to kill and does make it very frustrating for your opponent when you have these big blobs of guys with shields on the table. But it is thematic. I do agree with that, but it's a very strong Rite of War.
Yes, that's the thing. The Phalanx Warders with their special rules, I think it's called Lockstep, makes them very hard to displace when they're in coherency and base to base. And also, the fact is, they can have up to 20 models, so it just makes it a huge blob of very hard to move infantry that's going to slowly march up the table. But it's also very expensive to run. I think a 20-man squad is over 230 points to play that. Sorry, 430 points to play that. And you have to run, if you're running 2 of those, that's nearly 1,000 points just sunk into your 2 compulsory units. Now, compulsory units, they'll probably be there till the next game and beyond, but still, it's a very elite-focused army.
Yes, it is, and it weathers all weapons equally well because taking the 4-up invuln, rerollable, again, it's better than your 3-up, so it doesn't matter if it's a bolter, it doesn't matter if it's a las cannon, you just have a higher chance to save everything in general.
Yeah, and as Jason was mentioning, the fact that you are limited to your fast attack and elites, you're not really taking that many more elites other than maybe some dreadnoughts per se for this. And fast attacks have actually seen less and less deployment. For us out in Far East Wargaming in Asia here, we don't see too many fast attacks coming to play. So it's not really a detrimental thing for this Rite of War.
Nope, not at all. Dreadnoughts, everybody's going to take dreadnoughts. Rapier carriers for the Imperial Fists with heavy bolters. Apothecaries. You'll still have enough slots, trust me. I mean, because again, even if you take a couple blobs of Phalanx Warders, you can just take a cheap troop choice like a attack squad or a recon squad. Boom, you've still got 3 elites choices and possibly 4 if you add another troop choice in the mix.
Yeah, and once again, they've got Heart of the Legion with an Apothecary if they're close to an objective. That's a 4+ rerollable invulnerable save, and then a 4+ mitigation save. Just, I really don't know. Even weight of fire there doesn't come into play.
No, I've seen some lists. This is the last thing I'll say about this, but I mean, I've seen some lists where they're spamming Phalanx Warders, they're spamming Terminators of various flavors, whether it's command squads, Huskarls, or regular Terminator squads. You can flood the board with a lot of invulns. Again, very, very hard for your opponent to deal with that unless he's just got sheer weight of fire to really whittle these things down.
Well, enough about the Stone Gauntlet. I think we've kind of killed that horse there. But let's move on to their second one. And that is another nice one, I honestly agree. The Hammerfall Strike Force here. And it's a deep strike focused Rite of War.
This one is cool. It was modified from 1.0. The 1.0 version was basically unusable. But for this one, your Phalanx Warder squads, again, become troop choices, but importantly, they don't gain line and they don't gain Heart of the Legion. Any units, with all the models having the infantry unit type and Legion of Astartes Imperial Fists, they can be given deep strike for 30 points. So pretty much all of your infantry units can deep strike if you want them to and want to pay the points. If you choose to deep strike these models, you get a free 5-up Shrouded on the turn that you come in. So very, very, very nice, very, very strong, very, very thematic with the Imperial Fists teleporting in on all these daring assaults on enemy ships or fortresses, etc. I really like that, and I'm glad that they made this one actually usable compared to 1.0. Again, the limitations are actually not too bad. Vehicles do have to start in reserves. You can't have them be in a deep strike assault, subterranean assault, or outflanking assault. So basically no termites and some other units. And if you have this Rite of War, you can't take fortifications. Well, boohoo. Most people don't really take fortifications. I like this Rite of War a lot. I think when people make lists using this Rite of War, it's really, really cool. It's really, really thematic. And can be quite strong and surprisingly mobile with all the deep strike that's available.
That's the thing. You're taking the deep strike option really instead of taking a Rhino. So you're going for the deep strike maneuverability as opposed to the Rhino's maneuverability. The advantages of deep strike is you can actually charge on the turn you come in. So if that's a close combat focused one, you can do that. You can definitely shoot. And you have more survivability than normal with the 5+ shrouded you get when coming in with this deep strike. But one of the things you have to bear in mind... Sorry?
No, go ahead.
Well, one of the things you have to bear in mind for the Imperial Fists is they have the ability to get deep strike from any of their independent characters for slightly less at 25 points. So unless you're trying to deep strike really the majority of your force, there's very little point to use this Rite of War.
Well, the thing that I was going to say is you can actually shave some points. I mean, you raised a good point about you don't need a Rhino. So a bare bones Rhino is 35 points, so you're paying 30 for this versus 35 for the Rhino. Because of the free shrouding, you don't necessarily, for some units, have to take an apothecary if they're really kind of a suicide squad or whatever. So yeah, I mean, you can shave points with this play style depending on how you build your list. I do again think it's more effective because a lot of units that you wouldn't normally stick an independent character with can now deep strike anyhow. Melta squads. I don't know, veterans with shotguns for concussive. I mean, just a lot of different things. It opens up a lot of different units that can come in and do nice things.
Yeah, I see this used for those more disposable squads, which would normally come in the old edition, outflanking to disembark, shoot, and die. Instead, they're deep striking, shooting, and potentially dying. And with the preference nowadays to having some tanks in the back line, especially the barrage ones, the Scorpiuses and such, this is a very effective way to reach them quite quickly.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, moving on to their last Rite of War. This one is another pretty strong one here, and it's Templar Assault. So focusing on the other Legion-specific unit that the Imperial Fists have.
Yeah, so Templars, when compared, I think, to the Phalanx Warders and the Huskarls, they're definitely the less popular choice. This Rite of War does allow you to take them as troops, which is good, but they don't gain Heart of the Legion, they don't gain line. All models that are Templar Brethren unit, actually they do gain Heart of the Legion, they do gain line, for the duration of the turn in which they disembark from the model, so from your transports, you gain the bonus of Rage 2. So that does up the offensive potential of the Templars quite a bit. But again, I don't really see that as better than what you can get elsewhere, either through the other Rites of War or the other rules. The limitations, you have to use those 2 Templar Brethren units to fill your compulsory troop slots, not a big deal. You can only take it with the Loyalists, not a big deal. All detachments in the army that are in this Rite of War must have a variant of the Legion of Astartes X special rule. So that does exclude some units that, for whatever reason, don't have Legion of Astartes. You can't use them with this Rite of War. And very similar to what we saw with the Stone Gauntlet, you can't have more elites and fast attack than you do with troops. But as we talked about already, I mean, that's not really a limitation. This is a fluffy one. It's kind of cool. If you plan on using Templars and you plan on putting them in transports, then this is definitely the one for you. But again, there's just so many good choices that the Imperial Fists have for offensive close combat power. I think that's why many people just still don't play this Rite of War that often.
Yeah, the Templar Brethren are arguably stronger in close combat in terms of hitting power, but maybe not in survivability because they don't have an invulnerable save, though they are all in Artificer armor. And a 10-man unit compared to the Phalanx Warders, I think is slightly more expensive at around 275 base without any of the upgrades such as the Solarite Power Gauntlet, which is their beautiful power fist, basically. But also, one of the things I think you have to bear in mind is this is, for thematic-wise and for the lore-wise, this is really excluding you running armies with allied detachments. You have to run full Imperial Fist armies. And that's kind of what they're hinting at there with some of their limitations. Now, I don't think we see all that much of double legion lists, especially out here for us at Far East Wargaming. Actually, I don't even think I can say we've ever played a joint list in terms of a 1v1. We have played some 2v2s, but in 1v1, I don't know anybody who's ever played a separate Legion allied detachment.
Yeah, well, I mean, no Mechanicum with this Rite of War, no Solar Ox with this Rite of War, no Militia with this Rite of War. If for some reason, you would play those forces together, you can't with this Rite of War. But again, people just don't play it that much, which is really a shame, because actually I think the Templar Brethren models, whether it's made with the Forgeworld bits on Mark III or Mark IV, or I've seen people even use them on the Mark VI, I think it looks really cool. I love the models a lot, but yeah, as a Rite of War goes, it's just not as strong as the others, or even some of the generic ones.
I think for those Imperial Fist players who are looking to make something that is, I think, at its heart, very Imperial Fists, but don't wish to go for the, I'm going to say, OP Phalanx Warders, building a Templar Brethren focused list would still have a very small unit count because of the cost of the units, especially once you're talking about adding the transports, and on a 10-man squad you're talking about land raiders to make these most effective, because it's completely pointless to put these guys in a Rhino because you can't assault out of it. But it can be a quite nice small force that isn't too OP but still has a significant chance of winning.
Yep. I mean, the Templar Brethren do have a mountain of attacks. We'll talk about that in a moment. And this giving them, additional special rules on top of that means that they're just going to be rolling a lot of dice when they get out. But I totally agree with you. It's just not as useful as the others. And other than being thematic, it just doesn't get much play.
Yeah. Well, we're here at Far East Wargaming. We do try and push those to play the thematic as opposed to min-maxing everything. Because honestly, if we wanted to min-max everything, everybody would just play Fury of the Ancients and be done with it.
Absolutely. My Iron Hands Fury of the Ancients would be hated by all. But yeah, I mean, we are all about the narrative, and I do hope to see some players for the Imperial Fist playing this.
Well, that rounds up the Rites of War. Now let's move on to the next section, which would be the armory for the Imperial Fists. And again, they have, as we've talked about briefly, some very nice pieces in their armory here, which some, I'd even say, are pretty OP. And I think the first one is the Vigil Storm Shield, and how, well, this is just a nightmare for everybody to play against.
Yes, so, continuing the pattern of spoiled for choice, the Vigil Storm Shield, basically Legion Astartes Imperial Fist and independent characters that are not unique. So none of your named characters, basically, they can take a Vigil Storm Shield for 20 points. Also, Legion Astartes Imperial Fist, Tartarus Terminator Squad, Tartarus Command Squad. You can also give them a Vigil Pattern Storm Shield for 15 points each. You can also, for Cataphracti squads and Terminator Command Cataphracti squads, you can also exchange a Combi Bolter for a Vigil Storm Shield for 10 points each. Basically, what all that does is it allows you to now get a 3-up invuln. So as if most of the Imperial Fist units were not hard enough to kill, now all of a sudden the Terminators get even more hard to kill. Again, when you combine this with the Stone Gauntlet, I mean, you're just flooding the table with a lot of stuff that is incredibly durable. The points do add up. You can't get the bonus for 2 close combat weapons if you do equip this, but that doesn't come into play much with Terminators to begin with. Yeah, very, very nice little upgrade, but it is going to add up quick if you spam it a lot.
Well, it's for the independent characters, so it's a nice upgrade to the Iron Halo, for one. There. It really just, for basically 20 extra points, you can give them a 3+ instead of a 4+ invul. Where we're playing with larger instant death things, that even +1 to your invul save, especially against things like Brutal, if you're ending up suddenly in combat with something and something has gone deadly wrong to be there, you have a significantly greater chance of coming out alive on the other side.
Yeah, the interesting thing is it now makes Cataphracti Praetors almost no reason to take if you're an Imperial Fist player. Because a Cataphracti Praetor costs 135 points, a Tartarus Praetor is 110. A Tartarus Praetor with the Virgil pattern Storm Shield is actually cheaper than a Cataphracti and has a better invuln. So you can save a little bit of your points there as well. Uh, in most cases, you're usually going to see your Tartarus HQ choice with one of these, and he's usually with some Huskarls that have these, or a command squad that has these, and it makes a nice little Death Star.
Yeah, it gives a bit of survivability, and putting on the Tartarus actually gives you the ability to sweep. But again, you'd be putting him in, if you put him with the Tartarus command squad, they won't be able to take this. So there, you're kind of mix and matching your invols, 5+ and 3+. Still, just all in all, the Visual Storm Shield here is a very nice piece of war gear for the Imperial Fists, and I think is the early adaptation of what we had in 40k for the later Storm Shields.
Well, the Tartarus can take it. So you don't really have to worry about that. So your Tartarus Praetor and his Tartarus command squad can all take this. And for the Tartarus command squad, it's even cheaper. So, or not even cheaper, it's cheaper than the independent characters cost. So now they have a 3-up invuln and they can sweep and do all the things the Tartarus can do.
Oh, you're right. It does apply to the command squad. Sorry, it just doesn't apply to normal Terminators. Yes, so the command squads can definitely take this. Yes, no point in taking Cataphracti over the Tartarus command squads then.
Well, even your regular Tartarus Terminator squads, if you read it, they can take it. So
God,
no restrictions there. But yeah, I do agree with you that all Cataphracti are kind of pointless at this point, unless they're Huskarls.
Wow, I'm really misreading these today. Sorry, I thought it was independent characters. Yes.
It's late here. It's late here. You get an excuse.
Does this apply though to the Indomitus? Have they written a update for the Indomitus then?
Uh, 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 Good question. I mean, the rule is written. The Virgil Storm Shield here doesn't allow a Dominus to take it. It only specifically calls it. Doesn't look like they can, but I mean, if you want to let your opponent play his Indomitus as Tartarus, why not? But rule is written, no, it doesn't look like the Indomitus can take it.
Yeah, because it would make the Indomitus Terminators very cheap and with line to have then a 3+ invul save.
And Thunder Hammers. So, yeah, that could be a pretty brutal unit, so I'm kind of glad that it's excluded from this.
Well, the next piece of war gear is, again, pretty unique to them. It's Teleport Strike, which allows all the models with the Imperial Fist special rule that are in Legion Cataphracti Terminator armor, or Tartarus armor, or any of the Terminator armors, to get the Deep Strike special rule for 25 points. Now, independent characters can get this given to them directly for 20 points, and this is what we were alluding to earlier as the cheaper alternative to their Hammerfall Strike.
Yeah, it does. If you're not playing that Rite of War, it does allow you to do some deep strike shenanigans. I see this used quite a lot. Again, for your Praetor with his Death Star to teleport in, quite useful, and it's a big distraction Carnifex that you can't ignore. And I've had a big unit of Huskarls teleport in near my lines before, and trust me, it's not fun to deal with. But yeah, it's nice little flexibility for the Fists. And surprisingly, it gives them even more aggressive play styles and not just the castling and not just the gun lines that we typically saw in the past.
Yeah, I think every time I've played against the Imperial Fist, you get a Huskarl squad or one of their Terminator squads deep striking in, and it tends to be the 10-man squads because with the Teleport Strike, you don't get the Shrouded save. So Interceptor, which is quite prevalent, as we've always been talking about, can whittle down even Terminators due to weight of fire if they deep strike into your lines and in line of sight.
Yeah, my most recent example actually was a 10-man Huskarl squad with Dorn teleported in. And even though I had 4 units with augury scanners, plus the additional interceptor reaction that I would normally get, we didn't kill that many. Just because the 3-ups are really hard to get through, or you can tank them on Dorn. Yeah, there's just different ways to kind of mitigate that. But yeah, you're right. If it's just a regular unit coming in, It's going to still be a bit fragile, um, but still, all in all, useful piece of war gear for the Imperial Fists, and I see almost every Imperial Fist list have this in some fashion.
Well, another piece of war gear that nearly every Imperial Fist list has is the Solarite Power Gauntlet. And this is basically an upgraded Power Fist, and any model with the Legion Astartes Imperial Fist special rule could exchange their Power Fist for a Solarite Power Gauntlet for only 5 points, or if they have a Thunderhammer, they can exchange it for free. And how this differs is, instead of doubling your strength, it's actually strength 10 and AP 1 compared to the 2 times strength AP 2 of a normal Power Fist.
Yes, I don't think I would substitute a Thunderhammer for this because the Brutal 2 on the Thunderhammer is really good. But if you're already going to buy a Power Fist and you can take this for 5 points, why wouldn't you? Because surprise, Battle Hardened 1 units, this Strength 10 is still going to get through that and instant death you. It is unwieldy, so it does strike last. I think in 1.0, if I remember correctly, it was also Master Crafted. They got rid of that, so it doesn't have that benefit. But this is still such a cheap upgrade that why wouldn't you take it on a model that could upgrade to it? Definitely a popular choice.
Yeah, the Strength 10 gets rid of that battle-hardened 1 that are annoying on some units. And against the Walkers, Strength 10 is making it easier for your character to to wound against these Toughness 7 and Toughness 8 there, which helps to whittle down that combat.
Yep, very nice piece of war gear.
Well, the last piece of war gear in the core rules is something that both the Imperial Fist have as well as their Blood Angels brothers, which is the Elastius Assault Cannon. Am I pronouncing that right?
Elastus, yeah, so a little bit of Roman terminology, I believe.
So this is another... Yeah, it's another order weapon, which is, again, fitting into the theme of the Imperial Fist, where they're now hitting on basically 2s with this here. And it can be exchanged for free. It can exchange for any heavy flamer for 10 points. And it can be mounted on your Predators instead of their turret weapon. You can get a twin-linked version of this. And any model who is a Dreadnought may upgrade this from the heavy flamer for an extra 20 points. And it's basically a 24-inch range, strength 6, AP 4, assault 4 weapon with rending 6, but the malfunction special rule. And what the malfunction really is it gets hot when you're using this weapon is as part of a reaction. It's a very strong weapon, but can add up if you start using it in a lot of units.
Yeah, I mean, for heavy support squads with heavy flamers, I see that as a popular choice for this. I don't know, I mean, obviously don't quote me on the math, but I don't know that I would take it on a Predator rather than the standard Predator autocannon that gets 4 shots at strength 8 and can rend. The twin linking is nice, but you're also trading range as well. Dreadnoughts definitely get some usage out of this because now you can put it on their fists, or if you're a Leviathan, you can put it on the chest weapons, exchanging the heavy flamers for these cannons as well. You're already going to be playing aggressive with the walkers in particular, so it's almost a no-brainer to stick this on your walkers if you can, because it is a very useful weapon. Vehicles can also take it besides just the Predators. So this would probably be, your sponsons, your heavy flamer sponsons could be upgraded. Your pintle mount weapon, which is a flamer, heavy flamer, could be upgraded as well. What, again, kind of limits it a little bit is the 24-inch range, but if you're already playing with some aggressive units or models, then why not? It's a nice weapon with that Assault 4, the chance to rend, and the Strength 6, wounding most of your infantry targets on 2s.
Yes. Well, the fact that you can take this on heavy support squads when you exchange them for flamers means you're getting an assault weapon, a 24-inch range assault weapon out of your heavy support slot, which can be useful with all the synergies that the Imperial Fist has for gun lines. These weapons are hitting on 2s, they're wounding on 2s, it's strength 6 against most infantry there, and rending on 6s is really to take out some of those sergeants or just units with AP with a 2+ save. It can be quite strong, but it does add up in the points because it's 10 points extra per model. So yes.
Yeah, I think that because it's an assault weapon, then the Rhino mounted heavy support squad becomes a viable choice. I'm just trying to think to myself. I think even veterans can take heavy flamers. Let me just. Yep. No, they can't take heavy flamers. I'm thinking of something else. But yeah, I see the most use on this is going to be again on your dreadnoughts and on certain vehicles.
Finally, we have one more armory entry that comes again from the Siege of Chthoniya, and this is an upgrade to the shotgun where they can now get a ferromag shotgun.
Yep, it's basically it gains a point of strength, it loses some range. It's only 10-inch range. It's assault 1 and it's breaching 6. So you're essentially trading concussive for that breaching. It's no additional cost. I could see some use for this. It's really just a question, do you want to be fishing for breaching or do you want to be fishing for concussive? And I think in most cases you're probably going to go for the concussive if you're running shotguns. But it's not a bad choice per se, and it's just, again, another option that they have in the armory.
Well, that rounds up all of the war gear for the Imperial Fists. I'm going to put a caveat so far, because they do seem to be constantly getting updates, so something undoubtedly will creep up into the rules and lore in the future. But the last thing we want to talk about for this part is their Legion console, the Castellan.
Yeah, I like this guy. So he's a 20-point upgrade to your Centurion. And in return for that 20 points, you gain the Fire Support Special Rule, the Heavy Unit subtype. And what Fire Support says is when you make an attack with a heavy weapon, the Castellan can increase the number of attacks with that weapon by +1 when making a shooting attack. Because for his war gear choices, he can take a heavy bolter, an autocannon, or an Elastius assault cannon. The heavy bolter's free, the autocannon's only 5 points, the assault cannon is 10. Each one of those gains an extra shot. So an extra shot on the autocannon is quite nice. You get more chances to do rending, and the same thing for the assault cannon as well. You don't get to choose things like jump packs, combat bikes, shields, boarding shields, power fists, solar right gauntlets. But basically, this guy doesn't want to be equipped for that anyhow. He's the guy that you kind of stick with one of your heavy support squads, and he just ups their damage potential a bit. Yeah, I can definitely see use for him. So if you're going to run an armistice, then maybe instead you run this Castellan. You have a little bit different weapon choices and war gear choices, but he's going to get a lot of extra shots, and the things that he gets extra shots with are going to be +1 to hit because they're all either auto or bolt weapons. Nice little choice, very thematic. Again, I think if you're going to run the armistice, then you would probably give this a serious consideration as well.
Would you take this over a Siegebreaker, though?
Great question. I think I would probably want the Sunder, right? Sundering missile launchers or sundering autocannons are really good. I do think that you would probably take a Siegebreaker instead of the Castellan, but at least you have some choices here, and he's not necessarily a bad choice.
Yeah, and it does make sense. Instead of the Armistice, if you were looking at that model, you would take the Castellan. But if I'm looking at the consoles for just the general ones you want to use in an Imperial Fist, I think a Siegebreaker has more value. The Master of Signals has lost a bit of its value because you don't need that 2+ to hit on the majority of those weapons. But then again, it doesn't apply to some of the heavier weapons that aren't bolt or autocannons. So you can have a need for a Master of Signals for a las cannon squad or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, all fair points. I think the takeaway for me is, I mean, opens up just different weapon options that you may not normally see in other legions, right? Heavy bolter, heavy support squads versus Volkite for Imperial Fists, good choice. Autocannons, not bad, but again, I think I would rather have the autocannon Sunder than getting his extra shot.
Well, to not make this Heresy Thursday too long, I think we're going to break this army review for the Imperial Fists down into 2 sections. And what we'll do is, we're not going to wait till next Thursday for another Heresy Thursday to continue this. We don't want to leave you guys hanging for another week or 7 days there. We're going to bring this to you in a couple days' time. We'll be looking at the Legion-specific units and the Primarch Rogue Dawn.
Yes, and we also have, I think, a couple extra choices that we can talk about from Siege of Chthonia as well. Yeah, so I definitely agree with breaking this in half because we've got a lot of units and characters to talk about. Hopefully you guys got a little bit of flavor from what we had to say today, and perhaps a little bit of the feeling that we think that the Imperial Fists are quite strong. But again, I don't think it's broken. I don't think it's necessarily overpowered, but I do think certain builds can be a bit oppressive.
I'll say this, for all the hate we are putting on them or the salt we're putting onto the Imperial Fists, I like the fact that they are leading this latest edition of the Horus Heresy. I think historically, painting Imperial Fists and getting their yellow to a really high level has been very hard to do, but with more recent techniques, which we can go into in the future, it's made the ability to put them on the table, especially with contrasts and pink xanatholing there, a lot easier for the average painter. And it's nice to see love coming towards them as opposed to the previous editions.
Agree. I think Imperial Fist Army is among the beautiful ones that when you see a nicely painted one on the table, and you're absolutely right, it's much easier to paint now. I do appreciate them giving some love. I just wish that they would give some love to some of the other legions and not keep burying us under Imperial Fist stuff. But hey, it is what it is. And if you are an Imperial Fist player, then congratulations, because you've got a great army in terms of rules and in appearance and everything else. So it's something to definitely be proud of.
Well, that rounds off our Heresy Thursday this week. From me, Richard, thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back in a couple of days with the second part of this Imperial Fist Army review. So, thanks for listening in. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, have a good one.
Thanks, everybody. Keep those comments coming. They fuel the fire for us to keep doing this. We appreciate it. And as always, happy wargaming.